Welcome, everyone. My name is Kodo. Can everybody hear me okay? Is it too loud? Feels a little. I speak softly, so they tune me way up. Who didn't see the moon yesterday? Or today it just rose, so you wouldn't have seen it because it literally just rose. Yeah, you got to go check it out. Go check it out. Feel free, yeah. Do you guys know that it's the biggest supermoon in almost 2 years? So they say it's something like 20,000 miles closer to the go. If you're online, if you can see the moon, raise your hand. I can't see you, but yeah, apparently this was always, it's like, you'll see why this is important later in the talk. If you don't disappear. Anyway, magnificent, right? So yeah, apparently there was a supermoon this big in November of 23. And there won't be another one for 2 years. And we also had the largest and brightest Fusatsu ceremony this morning. Who was there for that online? Were you there online? It was all the more radiant because Roshi was there. Thanks for coming down, Roshi. She came and sat in her seat in the middle of Zazen. Nobody noticed her slip in. And it was really, Roshi was still recovering from heart surgery and other things. Is still as busy as you might imagine, but also trying to slow down. It's just so wonderful to have your presence, Roshi. I almost wrote you and said, you don't have to come to the talk, just watch it online. And I was like, nope, no, people need Roshi's presence. Thank you, Roshi, for being here and for being there this morning. I was especially grateful as we did this ceremony of renewing our vows, which is the full moon ceremony, Fusatsu. So often we can do rituals and just by rote. It's like once you've done it enough times, you can just kind of bow and do the chant and think about other things. And this time I really found myself with Roshi sitting there watching me. I better, really better not just be mindless. And I really felt like, wow, this is what an amazing thing to do this every month, to remember the most important things to us, our vows that we commit to as Buddhists, and whatever they are, even if you haven't received the vows formally, if you're able to kind of chant these things, which most people would just agree with are important for us, like being kind, not stealing, not lying, not killing. And so I just felt really super full moon grateful for that, and for all that Roshi brings. So you may know that Fusatsu is the one ceremony that we do in the dark. So we don't turn on the lights for the ceremony. And that's because, for one thing, it's a call and response. Come on, sit down. This is good friends of Upaya and us coming in with their 2-year-old. Always good to have kids. And so we do it in the dark. And today we thought we'd really like to give the online community an experience of darkness during Fusatsu. So we turned off the camera halfway through. No, for our online community, deep apologies. The camera actually ran out of batteries right before the ceremony started. Luckily, it was, hopefully you got to experience the moon at that time. It's sometimes you run out of juice and you got to take a rest. So the camera hopefully will be back in business tomorrow morning. And thank you for your patience there. So, and of course, online was not just our cloud community, but our chaplains who've been deep in the midst of their online intensive this week. And it was kind of one of the closing sessions. And I got a message from Mary, the director of the chaplaincy program later. It's like, what happened? And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry we lost the battery. But I'll use it in my talk. And she said, perfect. So that was good. So thank you to Mary, Petra, all of the chaplaincy team, and the wonderful candidates that are online right now. So appreciate your presence, and wonderful that we can do this together in a hybrid way. So I was just in Minnesota last weekend for a wedding with the family, and it was a Halloween wedding. Very interesting. It was very fun. Um, Beautiful occasion where, it's just the usual bride and groom coming together to give their vows to each other. And this one happened to be like totally secular. And I'd never been to a wedding that was more devoid of any kind of religious, um, any hint of that. Not that that's bad one way or the other, but it was just fascinating. Even the officiant, who was a friend of the family's, said something like at the end, "By the power vested in me by the state of Minnesota, I pronounce you husband and wife." And it's just like, yep, that is the. Maybe they say that anyway. I don't know. Do they say that? I kind of imagine that you would say by the power of God or Buddha or something. So, but it was a sweet ceremony and kind of short, and yet it was a ceremony of giving vows. Um, And so I just wanted to share a little bit what the bride and groom said to each other, what they promised as their vow. The bride said, "I promise to be present and to keep learning about you, no matter how long we've been together. I promise to respect our differences as much as our similarities. I promise to support you in achieving your dreams and to remind you of your life and strength when they are hard for you to see. Most importantly, I promise to love every version of you and us as we continue to grow together." Beautiful, right? And I was thinking, as we were, as I was reflecting on how we do this vow ceremony every month, it's like we do these beautiful wedding vows once. I guess some people might do them on their anniversary or something, which that could be good, a good practice. The husband said, "I promise to be present in the life that we've built together, to never stop learning who you are, to promote your voice and encourage you to speak out, to be your teammate through any challenge, to uphold levity in our relationship, and to always make room for fun." And then he told some jokes. Um, but it was just beautiful vows for a beautiful life ahead. They've already been together for, over a decade. So but they're young, and I was just thinking I should call them up and say, "You know what? You guys should say those vows every month on the full moon, see what happens." And of course, I reflected on my wedding to Nicole, which Roshi officiated in 2021. And she actually wrote a song of her vows. She's a musician that she kept a secret from me. So I had no idea this was going to happen. James was there. And it was so beautiful that she just said, "Bring out the guitar." And it was just like, there it goes. And I was like, when was the last time I heard that song? Years ago. And I can kind of hear it in my head, but I thought, we should do this regularly. And then, I should write a song too. Um, and then a year after that beautiful ceremony, of course, we had our baby blessing for Skyla. When are we doing a baby blessing for Leon? Um, and there was another expression of vow. Ceremony so often, if not always, is reminding us of what's most important to us, and then what are we committing to? And I said to Skyla, as part of the ceremony, "I wish for you to be exactly who you are, to become exactly what you will become, and to fully experience your entire life with all of its joys and sorrows, pleasures and pains, losses and gains, completely and fully. In a word, may you realize and actualize just this." So you're rolling your eyes. I'm rolling my eyes too. I'm still a Zen geek as I was then. Uh, it's a Zen thing. But just be who you are and enjoy, right? That's what I was trying to give to her. And of course, there was more to it, and how we use I loved using both the 5 Buddha families and our 16 Zen Peacemaker precepts to create those vows, both in the wedding and for Skyla. So I thought, maybe on her birthday, which is coming up soon, her 4th birthday, I'll find those vows and see if she has enough attention to give me for a moment to say those again. So I'm feeling so moved by vow, by ceremony, by ritual, and how it's kind of I don't know, for me, because I'm at the Zen Center and we do so much ritual and ceremony, I forget how lacking ritual is in most people's lives, and that I think we're hungry for it, right? Maybe that's why some of you came or have come to a Zen center, because it's like the rituals or ceremonies um, of your upbringing might not feel right, and so you want something else, but you don't want something too, whatever, and so you might find your way here, and I think that's a beautiful inclination and one that's very natural. And we've done um, programs on ritual and liturgy, making the invisible visible is a beautiful expression for that. And so, yes, just feeling grateful for the ability, for the what is it called? The gift of ceremony that's been handed down to us, of course, from generation after generation, and then co-created through enacting it every time we do it. And one of the things that makes it so powerful, of course, is the embodiment of it. Right? We could just stand there and say the vows, but we chant them. Right? We use our voice. We come into unison, into harmony, into unison together when we try to come in one voice. And then with each, for this morning ceremony, for instance, with each vow, we make a prostration. We put our whole body on the floor and really kind of raise up our Buddha nature and raise up our vow and commitment and take it in that way. And so this kind of multivalenced, full body and mind and voice way of drinking in the precepts and recalling why we're really here. So we have another ritual that we also do, typically daily, and so sometimes more than once in a day. That's also an expression of vow. And I'm wondering, what is that? What do we do every day? What's another ritual we do every day? You could just call it out. For residents who are here every day.
We bow to them.
We bow, yes, that's a kind of a ritual act. But like actually, what's one of the chants we do every day? Miyogata, that's a good one. We do a lot of chants. Verse of Atonement. That's actually a critical part of the ceremony, but it's not itself a kind of vow. But I'm thinking of the 4 vows. Did you say 4 vows? Okay, I thought I heard you. Good. So the 4 vows, which we do every day, sometimes twice. But the 4 vows themselves are not the actual ritual. So what is the ritual that precedes the 4 vows, which are kind of the capping of that ritual?
Zazen.
Yes, who said that? Yes, A+. Zazen. Zazen is a ritual, or can be seen as such. Zazen is many things, of course. But Zazen can be thought of as a ritual enactment of something. And there's this wonderful book called Zen Ritual. And it's a collection of essays on the topic put together by Stephen Hine and Daniel Wright. And in this is a really crucial reading, I think, for anybody into Zazen by Taigen Dan Leighton. And I'll just read the first paragraph. The title is Zazen as an Enactment Ritual. So Taigen writes, Buddhist meditation has commonly been considered an instrumental technique aimed at obtaining a heightened mental or spiritual state, or even as a method for inducing some dramatic enlightenment experience. So who thinks of meditation basically in that way? I mean, you don't have to give yourself away. Don't worry about it. But let's just agree that most of us, at least at some point, have thought of meditation as instrumental, as something that we use, an exercise or practice to achieve some goal, some end, be it a level of meditative equipoise or samadhi, or just being a better person, lowering our cortisol levels. There's so many things that meditation actually does do that you could use it for in that way. But in some branches of the Zen tradition, he goes on, Zazen has been seen not as a means to attaining some result, but as a ritual enactment and expression of awakened awareness. This alternate, historically significant approach to Zen meditation and practice has been a ceremonial, ritual expression whose transformative quality is not based on stages of attainment or meditative prowess. So I kind of got that, from the teachings we received, but to hear it so kind of straightforward in this text, and Taigen goes through and shows through Dogen's writings and other sources in the early Chan literature how Zen can be thought of not as at all something to gain something else, but as a ritual enactment. And that's so important because we often say, sit with no gaining idea, sit with no attachment to outcome. And you're kind of like, well, then why would I be sitting here, right? Would I be sitting here if I didn't want something from this? If I didn't think it was going to be good for me or good for other people? Like, what is that? And so maybe it's just a paradox and you have to live with that paradox, which is fine too. But I think that thinking of Zazen or holding Zazen as a ritual or ceremony where you're not trying to get something from it, but you're using it to embody a kind of vow. You could call it the four great bodhisattva vows, or just your vow to awaken, our fundamental vow. That is why we sit, not to gain something, but to embody that vow, you could say. And so that's one way of looking at the kind of the simplest ceremony, just sitting. Like, it couldn't be simpler in a way. It does have the attributes of a ritual, because there's a form, right? Especially for Dogen and the way he talks about Zazen. Once you start thinking about it this way, you're like, oh, that's why the form is so important. The posture, the cosmic mudra, the way you sit aligned, and then you just think, not thinking, right? His Zazen instruction is so simple. Hold the form of the Buddha and just sit. So Taigen calls this, and this is dangerous, I think, this is an enactment and expression of awakened awareness. And so awakened awareness, what is that? What are we expressing there? And maybe he might not even need to say awareness. You could just say of awakening, or we might say Buddha nature, right? So in Bendoa, which we had a wonderful teaching in the practice period last month on, Dōgen says there, in Buddha Dharma practice and enlightenment, in Buddha Dharma, practice and enlightenment are one and the same. So I think we've heard this before, right? This is like one of his main teachings. Because it is the practice of enlightenment, a beginner's wholehearted practice of the way is exactly the totality of original enlightenment. For this reason, in conveying the essential attitude for practice, it is taught not to wait for enlightenment outside of practice, since it is already the enlightenment of practice. Enlightenment is endless. Since it is the practice of enlightenment, practice is beginningless. I'm not going to go through and explain each word. It's kind of like Dōgen often is, a poetically written sentence that just wakes something up inside me, and I don't even have to really understand where it came from or where it's going. But this paragraph to me points to, well, what we're enacting is this thing we talked about in my last talk, where the Queen Srimala Devi, the Śrīmālā Devi Sutra on, what are we talking about? Or have I lulled you into a trance?
Intimacy, joy.
Which are attributes of Buddha nature. Thank you. Yeah, it was too easy, right? You're like, of course. So Buddha nature. So we talked about this a few weeks ago. I had given a talk and wanted to explore the sutra, which we mention in when we say the names of the female ancestors, Queen Srimala, And so she has this famous lion's roar of Queen Srimala. And in it, she explicates, this whole teaching on Buddha nature, which is one of the most formative texts in the Mahayana canon. And in it, in a revolutionary way, she talks about Buddha nature as having these four, what they call positive qualities. And before that, Buddha nature was always talked about in the negative. Like you can't really say what it is at all. It's always what it's not. And so she talked about it as having these four qualities of, as you said, permanence, happiness or joy, self, or as Roshi and Kaz translated it, intimate, and joyful. And so this, of course, is also very dangerous. When we start talking about a positive attribute, it's a concept, and the mind will take a concept and then think that it understands what it is when that's not the point, right? With Buddha nature, it's not a concept, it's beyond all concepts. And so we kind of have to talk about it to give it attention in a way. I mean, we don't have to talk about it, but Dōgen says it's wonderful to practice Buddha nature, and it's wonderful to teach on it. It's wonderful to listen to it. And it's something that should be alive for us, is this inquiry into Buddha nature. And yet we have to be so careful with the concepts and how we reify them. So I mentioned at the end of that talk that I had just started to read this fascicle of Dōgen 23 in Kaza's Shobogenzo Busho, which is Buddha nature, and how it's a kind of page turner, because even though it's kind of long, it's like 27 pages in that one, you're just, or for me at least, it's just like, wow, something is happening and I don't know what it is. And later I want to go study it, but right now I just wanted to keep reading it. And so in it, after I got a chance to study it a little bit more deeply, and as a friend pointed out, there's a whole structure there where you have one section, and then he kind of gives the example from an ancient text, and then has a few points, and then goes on to the next one. So it's got this beautiful structure where each one is like a vignette of something, another facet, you could say, of this jewel that he's turning for us. You can imagine, he's just turning this concept, and the light is flashing out. But before you can settle on one facet, it's gone. And then the next one arises, and then the next one. And by the end, you have no idea what's happening, but you're faced with this jewel of light. So he doesn't speak directly to the four perfections or those four aspects. Oh, and by the way, so those four things come up every time we chant the Enmei Jukku Kannon Gyo. And in that translation, it's eternal, intimate, pure, and joyful. Being one with Avalokiteshvara, right? These qualities are there. And so how do we hold these qualities without reifying them, without making them into concrete objects or concepts? So I wanted to go through each one, and this is why the cheeky title of my talk, Buddha Nature 2.0, just means what Dōgen's kind of what Dōgen speaks to these four perfections. So eternal, right? Eternal, forever. Buddha nature is eternal. Of course, if something is so pervasive, Buddha nature, we say, Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing right here and now. How can that not be forever? And yet, what's the opposite of eternal? Impermanent. So is Buddha nature not impermanent? Well, Dōgen says, impermanence is itself Buddha nature. Permanence is the mind that discriminates the wholesomeness and unwholesomeness of all things. So discriminating mind, I think in this sense, like the one that picks and chooses. In the Sin Sin Ming, the great way is not difficult, just avoid picking and choosing, right? Easier said than done. So here it's like, oh, well then, if that's what permanence is, then Buddha nature is not permanence. It's impermanence. Dōgen writes, grass, trees, and forests are impermanent. They are Buddha nature. Humans, things, body and mind are impermanent. They are Buddha nature. Unsurpassable, complete enlightenment is impermanent as it is Buddha nature. And great parinirvana is Buddha nature as it is impermanence. There's a little turn there. And this is something, I mean, you have to, it's like you sit with this fascicle and he takes pieces of words and moves them around in such an interesting way. And Kaz has done this masterful translation, I think with Roshi on this one and other people. And then we have other versions of the text that are useful to look at and kind of can describe, you know, what did he mean by that? And how does this go here? And in fact, this is just an interesting aside. So the Sotoshu version of the text, which Dainen got for us, for Upaya, has these voluminous notes in the bottom. And I don't know if you notice this, Dainen, it's like it's a different person. It's like a different voice because the commentator is saying, well, this is an interesting way of putting it. I think what they probably mean is this. And it's just like they're in conversation with the translator in the book itself. It gives it a kind of personality and it makes it fun for some of us, I guess. And so, yes. And so he's saying, he switches it. Complete enlightenment is impermanent because it is Buddha nature. But parinirvana, which means complete enlightenment, is Buddha nature because it is impermanence. So there's a flip there. The point is, how can something be eternal if it is impermanent? And yet, what is more permanent, what is more eternal than impermanence itself? And if your mind just went, that's the point, right? This is a really great example of a self-annihilating concept. I love these. It's like emptiness, you know, well, if emptiness is empty of emptiness, then is it still emptiness? But then nothing is not empty, so then it must be empty, right? John Donne will get up here and do this until your mind explodes. And so impermanence is one of those. But everything is impermanence. If everything is impermanent, then can the concept or just can the fact of impermanence itself be impermanent? And it's just not something your logical mind will figure out. And so this is, I think, a great way of looking at the eternal aspect of Buddha nature. It doesn't mean as opposed to what is impermanent. It's totally inclusive. It's eternal and impermanent, arising and passing away in every moment, just like everything is, right? And then we come to the self, the aspect of the quality of Buddha nature that is self. And this, I think, is so wisely translated as intimate by Roshi and Kaz, because by calling it intimate, you're not saying it's actually no self, except it is actually no self, but it's also self. So what does intimacy mean here? And so the truth of boundlessness, of shunyata, the emptiness of an inherently existent self, you know, this is actually Nagarjuna's teaching, right, that came down to us, the Madhyamaka philosophy. And the flip side of that, so if we don't have a self, then what does that mean? We're completely interdependent. We're completely co-arising, right? Nothing is truly separate. And so that sense of interdependence means there's no separation. There's no separation between us. There's no, it's not that we're one thing, like one kind of glob of stuff. There's variety. And as I like to talk about the rainbow spectrum, you know, the rainbow spectrum is infinitely varied. And yet it's only when we draw lines around things that we can call them colors. And those are the concepts. That's when we block things out. So we're totally interdependent. We're totally connected. And there's no self. So that's intimacy. So that's where self and no self, again, annihilate in this truth. Then we have pure. So when we think of Buddha nature as pure, it is undefiled. Does that mean that poop is not part of Buddha nature? That tears, that pain, that suffering, that losing is not part of Buddha nature? No, of course, everything is included. So how could that be something that is, as we say actually in the Heart Sutra, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither defiled nor pure? And this is where I think the way that in Buddhist psychology they call the mental afflictions are defilements. So sometimes you hear like, oh, the defilements: greed, hatred, delusion, envy, pride. These are defilements of the mind. And it's like, well, how can something be, if this is all Buddha nature, then how could it be wrong? How could it be defiled? What's bad about that? And the thing that always comes up for me is the rope and the snake analogy. And actually, I looked this up. Apparently, it's not even in the early suttas or the sutras. It's just a metaphor that's been used so many times that we think it's in there. But I really wanted to go like find the primary text, but I couldn't. So if you know where there's a primary text, the analogy is you're walking down a trail at night and there's a coiled rope on the ground, but it looks like a snake, so you're frightened, right? And then you realize, oh, it's actually just a coiled rope. So that apprehension of a snake is the delusion. Right? You think there's something there that's not. And so that delusion has causal efficacy. It makes you afraid. It might cause you to, die of a heart attack. It might be like a serious thing, but it's based on a delusion. So delusions have, an effect on the world, obviously. And so it's not that a delusion itself isn't real, but the referent of the delusion, meaning the snake isn't real. So this is one that maybe it's a subject for another Dharma talk, but I'd really love to explore is like when we talk about what's real, what's not real, what's delusion, what are we practicing to see clearly, what is it? It's not to make it that, oh, you're bad or evil if you have delusions, but if you're acting out of delusion, you might be acting unskillfully. You might not be achieving the goals that you want to achieve. And that's where I think the Buddha was so skillful in not talking about good and evil, but in talking about what is skillful and what is not skillful. And how can we come to a wholesome or skillful way of being in life? In any case, so pure and defiled. Everything this is, as Suzuki Roshi said, and I think this can be the period on the sentence. Everything is perfect as it is, and it could use a little improvement, right? It's just both. And finally, joy, Raku Ga Jo. So, it's so interesting when an emotion comes into this, because this is like such a heady kind of thing. What is Buddha nature? And it's like, oh, it is joy. So what is that? What kind of joy is that? What is the feeling of it? Can we experience it? What does it feel like to experience the joy of Buddha nature? And if you think, well, it must be inclusive. So it must also include sorrow and grief and depression and loneliness and giddiness and ADHD and whatever. That's not an emotion, I guess, but it feels like it sometimes. So what is an inclusive kind of feeling there? How can Buddha nature be joyful? So when I was in Minnesota for this wedding, we went to this science museum in Minneapolis. It's incredible. I love places like that. I don't think I've been to one in years and years. They have all these little stations with all these kind of experiments that the kids can do and see how things work and learn about tones and waves and air molecules. I raced a T-Rex and lost by 200ths of a second, like on a huge, running. It was wild. Skylar wasn't impressed. And so this in this wonderful place, the kind of the capping of our day was to go to this movie screening on their omnisphere, which is like one of these giant globe spheres where you just feel like you're in the movie, right? And this one was on national parks. It's a beautifully done, kind of followed the story of these three people as they traveled the country and went to national parks. And one of the ones they told a story about was the Redwood National Park in California. And I thought of that as they showed these blazing fires on the screen. It was just like consuming, and thinking of the fires in California and all of the destruction and the Like, is that the joy of Buddha nature too? And it is. It is. It's all inclusive. The whole acceptance of that. And that's not to say we shouldn't try and deal with the suffering of this world and to address the fires in California and throughout the world of many kinds. But the thing that they said, which kind of poked at me, was, you've probably heard the story that a giant sequoia seed in the pine cone can't grow unless it's been through a fire. Did you all know that? It's wild. It's like the actual, so first of all, humans cut down 95% of the giant sequoias. So there's your first tragedy. And then these endangered, incredible, huge trees, where then they had the second misfortune of fire suppression. So then the humans didn't want there to be fires in the forest, so they suppressed it. And then there was no new trees. It's like, what's going on? And then at some point, somebody realized, like, they've evolved to take advantage of the clearing that opens up when the fire happens. Reminds me of James's poem, The Clearing. And so that, to me, is that expression of life within the destruction, within the fire, the lotus blooming on a sea of fire, as is sometimes said in our talks. And so, how do we radically accept everything that life has to offer? The hard stuff, the good stuff, and also engage. Of course, we're constantly engaging with wholesome and unwholesome, but underneath it is this, I think, this deep holding of all of it. Maybe that's the feeling of joy, of just that, yes, this life. So those were just a few of the responses that you could say Dōgen spoke to. So, it's my response, of course, and Dōgen probably would think it was pretty silly to try and use what he said to address something from Queen Srimala. But in exploring it, I hope it gives a sense of, like, oh, well, here's a different way of looking at these four perfections. In this fascicle, I was studying it, one of the most interesting parts is the story of Nagarjuna and his manifesting the full moon. Have you all heard this story about this? It's so interesting. So Nagarjuna, the 14th ancestor of our lineage that we chant. So the story goes, he was teaching in southern India, and someone in the assembly challenged him. Even if you talk about Buddha nature, no one can see it. Practices that bring good fortune, those are what matter. Like, okay. So then Nagarjuna said, if you want to see Buddha nature, first let go of your pride, or first let go of your self-conceit is another translation. So this is where it's like, oh, interesting. No self gives rise to intimacy of that quality of the Buddha, letting go of your pride. And then another person asked, is Buddha nature large or small? Nagarjuna said, Buddha nature is neither large nor small, neither broad nor narrow. It has neither goodness nor rewards. It has neither death nor birth. Then, while sitting on his teaching seat, Nagarjuna manifested his body in the shape of a full moon. The entire assembly could hear his Dharma talk, but they couldn't see him. Just this luminous full moon where he had been sitting. His Dharma heir, Kanadeva, we also chant, was the only one who understood. He said to the confused assembly, this is how the master manifests the form of Buddha nature and shows it to us. The samadhi of no form has taken the shape of a full moon. Buddha nature is vast, empty, and clear. Then Nagarjuna appeared back on his seat and taught in verse. This body manifests a full moon, expressing the bodies of all Buddhas, teaching that it has no particular shape. expressing that revealing it is neither sound nor form. Revealing Buddha nature is neither sound nor form. So that story, Dōgen tells the story, and then he says, for centuries after that, they would depict this moment, this powerful moment of Nagarjuna, by showing a full moon on a seat. And it's like that was, this was a painting of a full moon on a seat, and that was Nagarjuna expressing Buddha nature. And Dōgen, when he traveled to China as a young monk, searching for his answer, what is Buddha nature? He saw one of these paintings, and he said, can you imagine saying this to like the person showing you around? He said, truly, it looks like a piece of painted rice cake. And the monk who he was with, who was showing him these incredible, it's like, I'm going to go up to the statue and say, it looks like a painted rice cake, isn't it? It's just like this circle. And luckily he wasn't thrown out, but the monk laughed out loud. But for Dōgen, it actually wasn't a joke. He was seeing something there. And there's the saying, a painted rice cake does not satisfy hunger. So the representation of something isn't the real thing. And of course, the moon has become this symbol of enlightenment or Buddha nature. And you've got the famous monkey trying to, touch the moon in the water. And there's the saying from, I first heard it in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, the finger pointing at the moon is not the truth, right? It's just the pointer. And so we so easily go into, again, this kind of concretizing of concept as the thing. I even heard, I don't know if anybody can confirm that, I read somewhere that the Buddha said in his lifetime, I don't want any depictions of me after I die. And so for hundreds of years, like several hundred years, they never had statues of the Buddha or paintings or anything like that. And they first started cropping up as just empty chairs, which symbolized the Buddha. And then after 600-700 years, it was a long time, they finally started making statues of the Buddha. And now we have beautiful statues of the Buddha, which become objects of reverence. But just interesting to note, if it's true, he actually was like, no, don't do that. This isn't the Buddha. This is a piece of wood. Beautiful tree. And yet also they become ritual objects that we can kind of feel devotion for. And so it's this fine line, right, between feeling the devotion, feeling a sense of connection, and then also making that thing into it's like, this is what's giving me that connection. So I can't believe he said that. Dōgen later writes in the fascicle, if people think that Nagarjuna's manifestation of the full moon shape is merely a single circle, they truly see a painted rice cake. It is fooling others. Such laughing kills people. So I don't know if he really thinks you shouldn't have depictions of that, beautiful moment or not. Who knows? But he's making a point. In the end, Dōgen says something that I think brings this all together. Know that when you paint the manifestation of a full moon, do it on the cushion. When you paint the manifestation of a full moon, if you want to represent the full moon, do it there. Where did I go? Do it on a Dharma seat. Raising an eyebrow and blinking are just this, the treasury of the true Dharma eye, skin, flesh, bones, and marrow is just sitting solidly. And so we sit as a ritual act, actualizing Buddha nature, as what our dear teacher Dōgen has called us to do, without attachment to outcome, without trying to get something from it. As Roshi says, not as a self-improvement program, but just to be in this space of this unnameable thing. And so I'll close with a poem by well, attributed to Ryokan. The moon in the water, you try to scoop it up. Your hands are wet. That is all. The moon in the water, you try to scoop it up. Your hands get wet. That's it. Thank you.